red pyramid producing aqueous ammonia, the bent pyramid transforming that aqueous ammonia into solid urea, great pyramid producing sulfuric acid, and the central pyramid producing hydrochloric acid. You have to look at the system as a whole, otherwise you're missing the big picture. Where they were building landscape features that created the thunderstorms that were necessary to power these systems. Teotihuacan has one, the Luxor Temple Complex has one, Giza Plateau has one. So the Serapeum is connected into one of these Sphinx step-down voltage transformer systems. So we're sending voltage into the Serapeum. So this is the step pyramid in operation here, increasing the pressure and decreasing the pressure within the gas deposit to extract and pump out this methane. The bent pyramid is by far the best and most complicated structure, far surpassing the operation of the Great Pyramid. In the Pyramid of Meidum, for example, it was a test pyramid designed to model and test the physics and chemistry that would later be implemented into the Red Pyramid. The Red Pyramid is literally capturing lightning in a bottle. They implemented this technology and were able to capture the electric fields from lightning. A direct mathematical corroboration of these calculations in a 1 to 40 scale model. Everything is exactly correct in terms of the dimensions of the structure. This is why the Egyptian pyramids have the ability to concentrate electric and magnetic fields to drive and catalyze chemical reactions.
What is the next site on your list that we ought to talk
So
through?
Ryan, let's fire this back up. Okay, so let's get into the White Horse Hills.
Okay.
And how these things actually operate and how do they create thunderstorms. So this is Silbury Hill, right near Avebury.
I was just there a couple months ago.
Yeah. And I've had people from all over Wiltshire that hit me up and they're like, hey, I live next to one of these White Horse Hills and there's thunder and lightning storms that occur all the time, directly connected to these landscape structures. So again, going back to the mindset of the Neolithic person, let's say you saw a landscape hillside and it's always getting struck by lightning. So you study that landscape, you look at the features of it, you look at the geological composition of it, and what if we started to move those and build or terrain excavate some of the naturally existing hills to create these same physical features that could facilitate these thunder and lightning storms. So lightning still strikes all the time around this area. So Silbury Hill is a massive lump of calcium carbonate, chalk. All of the hills in Wiltshire are made from chalk. That's why they're white. They're white chalk hillsides. And Silbury Hill has the same chemical composition. And it's a chemical reaction that creates an exothermic chemical reaction that generates heat. Exothermic means it creates heat. So there's a number of factors that are required to create a thunderstorm. You need wind. You need directional wind change, which means it has to change direction, right? Wind shear. You need lift, something that's pushing the air into the upper atmosphere. You need heat and humidity and convection. So a number of different factors go into the creation of these cumulonimbus thunderstorms. The White Horse. So the White Horse, so these are all of the White Horse Hills across Wiltshire. And if you look at the center of that map, you'll see Avebury surrounded by White Horse Hills. And at the bottom, you also see Stonehenge down there at the bottom of the map. So these White Horse Hills are all over Wiltshire, with the oldest one of them being the Uffington White Horse Hill, which was actually carved during the Bronze Age. And all of these other white horses are replica carvings of this ancient one. These white horses are not ancient, the carving of it itself. They're modern. And they were carved by people who are in the know of exactly what these landscape features are. Again, secrets in plain sight. So this is just a list of different mythological traditions from Zoroastrianism to Islamic culture to Korean mythology that show that the white horse itself is directly connected to mythology of thunder and lightning storms. The white horse is a symbol for cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds, directly connected to electrical storms and lightning. So the first one, we actually visited this, the Cheryl White Horse. We just talked about the proximity of this one, 5,300 meters from Avebury, same distance as the White Horse Hill system in Luxor to Karnak Temple, same distance as the White Horse Hill to the Teotihuacan, all 5,300 meters. These landscape features that are supposedly not connected to this ancient technological system are all the exact same distance from these complexes. If you see 5,300, 5,300, 5,300 over and over and over again, at some point it's no longer coincidence, it's connection. Again, the math and geometry of these things never lie in terms of the connection of these structures across the planet. So this is the Cheryl White Horse. You can see the obelisk, which is a modern feature, but we were told when we went to Marlborough College for an investigation of a structure called Merlin's Mound that this obelisk is actually hollow, and it's originally supposed to be built around the standing stone or menhir that was originally in this same place. So all of these White Horse Hills, some of them have modern obelisks, but all of them are reported to have a standing stone or menhir that was atop this thing, a lightning rod. You can also see an earthen enclosure, which is a reservoir. So how does this work? Okay, so the Sir William Petty is the guy who built this obelisk, the Cheryl White Horse obelisk, and he was one of the founding members of the Royal Society, which the Royal Society was a modern intellectual and academic society that was developed, basically the foundation of modern academia in the UK, which also led to the Royal Society of Chemistry, which was the first academic society to really codify the academic pursuit of chemistry, right? So these guys were in the know. They were studying ancient technology. They were alchemists. They were interested in physics and chemistry and science, and he absolutely knew what this structure was. So there you can see the big white horse, and my wife and I walked up the pathway to the top of this thing, and I remember looking over and I'm like, man, this is not a natural formation. The shape of this hill, there's something very odd about this that screams terrain engineering. Like something was done, and this whole outcrop is all white chalk calcium carbonate. All of these White Horse Hills in Wiltshire are made from this chalk. So again, here's a picture from us on the side of the road looking at the obelisk at the top of this thing. And we hiked up to the top, and it is the highest point anywhere in the landscape. Perfect target for natural lightning strikes. And look at the features that go down the side of this thing. That slope is 100% a part of the terrain engineering. The hillside that you're looking at right there. Again, just a picture of the obelisk. Okay, so the generation of the cloud system itself. Air circulation. Hot, humid air being circulated into the atmosphere that creates convection and the generation of cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. This is how it happens naturally. And you see a hill there, a water source down at the bottom. This hot air convection is being circulated off the face of the hill up into the atmosphere that creates the cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. So down at the bottom, this is a modern water pump system because there's a subterranean spring that runs below the Cheryl obelisk. So we have a source of water, and we've identified the source of water that was utilized for the reservoir at the top. So what happens to make the system work? We talked about telluric currents being connected to these subterranean water deposits. So the telluric currents are going to build up a positive charge at the top of the hill, and the obelisk is going to attract a lightning strike, a naturally occurring lightning strike. That lightning strike is going to convert the calcium carbonate chalk into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So when you heat calcium carbonate, it converts into calcium oxide and calcium carbonate. And then you can just, whenever you want to generate your thunderstorm, your calcium oxide is already prepared. It's waiting for you to perform this ritual. So how do we activate the ritual? You open the spring the tap that floods the reservoir, and the water will flow down the face of this calcium oxide hill. The water reacts with calcium oxide, creating an exothermic chemical reaction that generates heat that creates calcium hydroxide. So by flooding the surface of these White Horse Hills, you're able to create the heat generation. Then the wind sweeping off of the cliff face circulates that hot air up into the atmosphere, thus providing the wind, the directional wind change, the heat, and the humidity that circulates that convective air pocket into the atmosphere to create cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. This is a thunderstorm generator.
It's like scoop marks.
Correct. It's because of the chemical reaction and the water erosion that flows down the surface of the face. It 100% looks like scoop marks. And that's an identifying feature of all of these White Horse Hills is they have the exact same, I call it a horseshoe scalloped cliff face. And we'll see that with all of the White Horse Hills. Again, we have this convection of warm air, warm, humid air being circulated into the atmosphere. This is how thunderstorms form. So this is a landscape terrain engineering project where they were building landscape features that created the thunderstorms that were necessary to power these systems. Teotihuacan has one. The Luxor Temple Complex has one. Giza Plateau has one. And again, this creates negatively charged lightning discharge that's attracted to the positive charge that builds up on the surface of the earth. So again, this is just a run through of all of the different White Horse Hills. Again, you see the big white horse, you see the reservoir at the top, and this big scalloped horseshoe hillside. Again, another perspective from Google Earth. You can see the scallop features, the big reservoir at the top. The water flows down the cliff face, possibly onto the other sides as well. Wind sweeping off the cliff face generates the White Horse. This is another one, the Hackpen White Horse Hill. Same distance, 5,300 meters away from the center of Avebury as Cheryl. It's the exact same distance away, inscribed with the esoteric symbol of the White Horse, telling you exactly what it is and what it's for. Same thing here. Water flows down the cliff face, hot air sweeps it into the atmosphere. Alton Barnes, another one of these White Horse Hill features. Exact same function. There's always a nice flat area at the top. A lot of these things have been completely transformed with modern farmland. So either the earthen enclosure is not there or the actual standing stone, but there are always marking stones at the highest point of these White Horse Hills that indicate where the standing stone or obelisk would have been. Again, you have that hot air convection, hot, moist air sweeping up into the atmosphere. Another one of these, Pusey White Horse, exact same scalloped horseshoe configuration on the hill face, same mechanism of operation. It's actually this huge scallop formation here. Same function, over and over again. All of these White Horse being inscribed on these cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator hills. This is the one here with the big scalloped face, the highest point marked by the obelisk, the White Horse over there in the corner. This is the Marlborough one, which is connected to a very mysterious structure known as this is Marlborough right here, Merlin's Mound, which is at the center of Marlborough College. And we actually got a special permission from the campus administrators. This is not a publicly accessible site because it's in the middle of a college campus. So we went up there, ran into the security guard. We were like, "We're here to see the mound." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "We're here to see Merlin's Mound." He's like, "Nobody ever comes here to see. How did you guys even know it was here?" And we're like, we're YouTubers and ancient site researchers, and we want to come see the mound. He's like, "Well, you can't. This is private property." And I was like, "Well, what do we need to do?" And he's like, "Well, let me contact the administration for the college. I'll talk to them, see if we can get you a permission, and just come back tomorrow." We're like, "All right, we'll come back tomorrow," because we were staying right down the road from there at the Stonehenge Inn. So we went back, and he's like, "Yeah, I got you special permission." We met with the campus administration, got some lanyards, and we got to walk up to the top of Merlin's Mound. and they're about to do an excavation of this as well. This is a breaking news. So Merlin, the wizard, right, connected with King Arthur mythology. So anytime you see magician, think alchemist, chemist. So Merlin the magician, with the ability to control the weather, and Merlin's mound is located in close proximity to the Marlborough White Horse, had the exact same function on this hillside. Again, there's a bunch of modern structures up here now. So I did this Google Earth investigation to see if I could find similar features at all of these sites. Same function. So this is the oldest one, the Uffington White Horse. This is Neolithic. And to me, it doesn't actually even look like a horse. It looks like a lizard or something of that nature. So I don't know where they got the horse from, but that doesn't necessarily look like a horse, but that's where we get all the modern white horses from. This is actually ancient, Neolithic period. And you see here at the bottom, this other mound that looks like Silbury Hill, that's called St. George and the Dragon's Mound. It is, according to mythology, the place where St. George slayed the dragon. The dragon fell from the heaven to earth and touched down on Dragon's Mound. So St. George in the dragon myth, he slays the dragon with a lance, a long pointed spear, a lightning rod. It's esoteric mythology, connecting ancient technology that's related to lightning. Anytime you hear dragon, think lightning. So St. George captures and tames the dragon by using a pointed spear or lightning rod. And this mound is called St. George's Mound. And they say that the reason that stuff doesn't grow on the top of the mound is because that's where the dragon's blood fell. So again, you see the exact same configuration, the earthen enclosure at the top that was the reservoir for the source of the water. Same exothermic reaction happened with Silbury Hill. It's another one of these calcium oxide mounds. The feathered serpent, the dragon, striking the landscape feature, creating your cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. So the East Nor obelisk. Okay, so you're like, oh, this is all speculation, la la la. It's not connected to cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. East Nor obelisk is another one of these obelisks that's located at the top of a White Horse Hill. The East Nor obelisk was falling apart, and they sent out a contract for the restoration of the obelisk. What's the name of the company that got the contract? Down there at the bottom left.
Nimbus Conservation of Rome?
Yeah, Nimbus Conservation. The name of the Masonic stone mason company that got the contract to restore the obelisk on the White Horse cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator is Nimbus Conservation. Nimbus is a word for cloud. Cumulonimbus being a thunderstorm cloud.
That's hilarious.
Nimbus Conservation.
Just random coincidence.
Yeah, they know 100% what these things are. I love that one. And again, you can see that Stonehenge is connected to all of these White Horse Hills, and Avebury is right in the middle of this. Avebury being the most powerful of the stone circle systems that was ever built, in my opinion. Avebury is a spectacular site. And again, this really quirky movie called Children of the Stones, where the serpent temple comes alive and it's getting struck by this beam of light. There's knowledge encoded in this movie too. Children of the Stones, if you guys are into weird, I guess this is like 1960s or 1970s movie about Avebury.
Okay.
Really, really cool. Okay, so Avebury is a huge landscape complex. It's not just Avebury. There's other structures in there. We talked about the sanctuary, but then you also have the West Kennet Long Barrow. Did you guys go over here?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the West Kennet Long Barrow brings in the discussion about passage chamber reactors, which is going to lead directly into the function of the Egyptian pyramids. Okay, so these passage chamber reactions, this is one in Japan, and the configuration of these things is the same all over the world. This one actually has a nice little channel leading down the center of it that brings water into the internal reaction chamber. So the West Kennet Long Barrow is a part of the Avebury Serpent Temple landscape complex. And these passage chambers were using ferrous sulfate, or rather pyrite, to create ferrous sulfate. So pyrite is one of the most abundantly occurring earth minerals on the planet, iron disulfide. And these passage chambers were using an oxidation reaction to transform marcasite or pyrite into ferrous sulfate. West Kennet Long Barrow being an example of one of these passage chamber reactors. And I'll show you how this exact chemical reaction, iron disulfide plus oxygen plus water equals ferrous sulfate and sulfuric acid. I'll show you exactly how that chemical reaction is encoded in the symbols of the Newgrange curbstone. These passage chambers also have high quartz content stone that utilize the inverse piezoelectric effect for a process called sonocrystallization, which facilitates the crystallization of the ferrous sulfate. Ferrous sulfate is a crystal. The product of the chemical reaction is a green crystal. Sonocrystallization using electric field induced inverse piezoelectric effect and ultrasound to create these ferrous sulfate. This is ferrous sulfate, this green crystalline material. Okay, so the symbols of the Newgrange curbstone. This is Newgrange, and this is the curbstone of Newgrange. And it has this weird stone sitting out front that has all of these symbols carved into it. This is depicting a chemical reaction sequence that was occurring inside of the structure. It is literally an instruction manual that tells you exactly what the structure was doing and how it operates. So by interpreting these symbols, we can figure out exactly how it operated. So on the left side, you see those squares? There's 3 squares on the left side, or diamonds, however you want to look at it, on the left side of the stone. See the 3 big spirals?
Yep.
To the left of that, you see those 3 stones?
I see like 5 maybe.
They have radiating things coming out from them, but like the 3 things on the far left.
Okay.
Those 3. So there's 3, yep, Ryan, yep, that's it. There's 3 individual chambers inside the reactor of Newgrange. This represents the place where the pyrite was placed in the chemical reaction. So on the left, we have the pyrite in the 3 chambers inside of Newgrange. Okay, see those undulating lines at the bottom? That represents water being introduced into the lower component of the structure. The spirals represent air flowing into the passage chamber, creating this moist air oxidation reaction. Again, iron disulfide plus oxygen plus water transforms the pyrite into ferrous sulfate. And the triple spiral symbol that you see there, that represents air circulating inside of this triple chamber system. Okay? On the far right, you see those diamonds, how it's a slightly different shape from the squares on the left. You see those 2 coming out on the right?
Yep.
Those are the ferrous sulfate crystals. And on the top right, you have sun. So we talked about the duration of the chemical reaction and how long does it take. I think this was an annual production process. And I'll get into why that's the case here in just a second. So again, to illustrate the concept a bit more, you have the wavy lines at the bottom, the iron disulfide being placed in the reaction chamber system. You have air circulating in the chamber, and then the ferrous sulfate crystals, the product, are depicted on the right. This is the whole thing overlaid on a diagram of the structure with water filling the bottom, the air circulating in the chamber, the iron disulfide being transformed into ferrous sulfate, and the ferrous sulfate crystals being collected on the other side. So again, this is the reaction sequence. Iron disulfide plus oxygen plus water equals ferrous sulfate. That's the exact structure that we see here. On the left, you have your chemical reactant, the iron disulfide on the stone. You have air, oxygen, circulating in the chamber, and you have water at the bottom of the stone. It is a Neolithic, symbolic instruction manual that's telling you exactly what Newgrange was for. And I don't think anyone has ever attempted to decipher these symbols in any way related to the function of the structure. It's a chemical reaction sequence. This was their way of telling us exactly what this structure was doing.
That's pretty cool.
So again, it's just oxidation. All you have to do is pile up the iron disulfide in a heap. It's called heap leaching, is the modern process. It oxidizes by air in the presence of water, and it will transform that pyrite into iron or ferrous sulfate. Again, just a picture of it. So here we see the configuration of the chamber system itself, with the sun going in on the solstice. It just so happens that ultraviolet light, this is a paper here called Biohydrometallurgical UV production of ferrous sulfate heptahydrate crystals from pyrite in the presence of coal tailings. And they used light, ultraviolet light, to produce the final conversion of the product into crystalline ferrous sulfate using light, ultraviolet radiation. So the sun that goes into the passage chamber creates the final chemical reaction. And we were talking about these solstice celebrations. It was the completion of the alchemical process. So why were they doing this? Why would they spend all of this time and effort to build the structure for an annual production cycle that took a whole year? Their mindset was not short-term, it was long-term. It was generational. They were trying to make sure that their civilization would survive this cataclysm. So now we're talking about these structures that are built right after the end of the last ice age. They're rebuilding their civilization. They wanted to make sure that all the subsequent generations would be able to benefit from these structures. So it wasn't our 24/7 immediacy mindset. This was long-term. This was generational. And if you let nature do the work, ferrous sulfate in groundwater will create deposits of bog iron. This is how it happens naturally. And there's tons of bogs surrounding all of these structures across Ireland. And ferrous sulfate solution introduced into the groundwater is gradually transformed by acidophilic bacteria in the bogs into deposits of bog iron. So they were able to harvest iron metal from these bogs by doing this chemical reaction. Iron being a super important resource for construction and everything else. Letting nature do the work. You could also harvest that solution directly. Ferrous sulfate is also a dielectric material that has a capacity for storing electric fields. But you can use that ferrous sulfate if you extract the solution directly. You can distill it to create iron oxide that you can then smelt to make iron. You can use it to create sulfuric acid. And ferrous sulfate, this is the most important part, is precipitating gold that has been dissolved in a solution of aqua regia. Do you know about aqua regia? Aqua regia is a combination of hydrochloric acid and nitric acid, and it's one of the only chemical solutions that can dissolve gold. For processing, purifying gold. But once you dissolve that gold, you have to have something else that you add into the solution to precipitate and drop out that gold. Ferrous sulfate is utilized to precipitate gold that has been dissolved in a solution of aqua regia. So the question should be, what were they using that purified gold for? So again, evidence of this lightning, the fulgurites on the Giza Plateau. And the Giza Plateau itself is one of these cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator systems, with the heat coming from the black basalt. So this is the pyramid complex at Abu Sir again. These are some of the saw cuts in the black basalt there, and you can see the thickness of the saw blade. There's an overcut. You see how the rim hangs over like that? That shows the thickness of the saw blade that cut through that piece of black basalt. This is another saw blade cut in the black basalt at the Giza Plateau, Eastern Temple. And you can see the green material in here. They've taken chemical analysis data. We were talking about the corundum particulate abrasives, and the green stuff is, I hate to break it to people, it's arsenical copper. There's a big myth about the tools used in Egypt that it was pure copper. If you talk to any credible archaeologist, it was not pure copper. It's a compound called arsenical copper, or otherwise known as arsenical bronze, which was widely used in the ancient world as a more capable metal cutting tool. It was not pure copper. It was not 100% copper. It's an alloy of copper and arsenic that creates a much more capable blade. And they took samples of the material from in the saw blade cuts of the black basalt and tubular drills. They found particles of arsenical copper and particulate abrasive from corundum. Corundum being the second hardest mineral on the planet, and the abrasive slurry is the magic of ancient Egyptian stone technology, the abrasive. But getting back to black basalt. At the beginning of the conversation, we talked about the color coding of stones. White, limestone, dielectric, electric field storage. Red granite, generation of ultrasound. Black basalt for heat storage. That is where the heat source was coming from on the Giza Plateau that generated this cumulonimbus thunderstorm system. So we took samples of my colleagues at the Acidic Project. This is showing just the crystalline microscopic analysis of the black basalt. And here's a couple of papers that talk about the utilization, quote, the utilization of basalt stone as a sensible material for heat storage. So again, if I make a claim about something, I'm going to show you research papers that support that hypothesis. So there's a number of papers here. Investigation on the thermal properties of black basalt samples in Egypt, talking about using this material as a thermal insulating material for storing heat. Another one here, basalt fibers. Basalt fibers can resist flame, continuous temperatures of up to 700 C, chemicals, acids, and bases, very good electrical insulators, and have good mechanical properties. So we use black basalt fibers today in all sorts of insulating properties. Again, thermal and acoustic performance evaluation of basalt fibers and panel insulation. And another one here talking about the rock wool industry that utilizes black basalt for thermal and acoustic insulation properties. So anytime you see black basalt, think heat storage. And these are some images of the pyramid complex at Avebury. And this is the inlet. So the first slide I showed today was the inlet of the red quartzite collection bowl system at the pyramid of Newgrange and Avebury. This is the inlet.
What you showed first was the outlet, right?
Yeah,
yep.
Correct. The outlet in the collection bowl. So this is the inlet to that system at the base of the pyramid. And you can see here, it goes under that lintel beam and it goes down toward the end of the picture underneath the black basalt floor of the temple into the collection bowl at the end. So it's going underneath all of this black basalt floor. Then it makes a reappearance right here at the tail end of the conduit where it's depositing an aqueous liquid solution of some sort into that collection bowl.
Are those the only three places that you can see this system?
Yes.
Okay.
At this particular site.
Okay.
It starts at the base.
Is there any kind of like proof or any indication that it does go all the way through, like, versus just having three random pieces that seem to be connected? Like, is there any proof that says that, hey, this is a straight line from here to here, or is it?
I'll show you the original diagrams by board chart,
okay,
which was the archaeologist that excavated this thing first, the Avebury pyramid complex, and I'll show you his diagrams that show nowadays you can't see any of it because it's reburied in sand, and the whole thing runs underneath the black basalt floor. So the only time this quartzite, and another reason you know it's connected is because it's the only quartzite used in this area. So here you can see quartzite, the quartzite lintel beam, and it's the exact same material as the red quartzite at the end. So it starts here, and then it disappears under the floor, and then it pops up. You can see the channel there on the left makes a reappear. All they have to do is clear out all the sand.
And the explanation is rainwater.
Correct.
She's capturing rainwater.
Yeah, correct.
And
from that little tiny inlet
yeah,
on the base of the pyramid,
right.
all of the rainwater that's falling all over the site, there's one tiny little inlet into this channel.
But
that's the conventional.
Why would you want an inlet on one side of a pyramid going under a pyramid? And
that's just the only explanation that board chart came up with, is for water drainage. That's the conventional story. They make no attempt to explain it any further than that.
Okay.
That's just what they say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
it's not a good explanation.
No, it's it's very weak, very limited.
Yeah.
So then you're saying, how does it work then, according to your
so
theory?
let's get into that.
Yeah.
Okay. So lightning strike. And you can see the original diagram underneath this. You see the red dotted line?
Yeah.
That's board chart's original diagram. So lightning strikes, and it heats that black basalt. So this is showing a black basalt quarry. Another interesting thing, I'll talk about that in just a sec. All right, so the dotted line, you see the area that says surviving drains?
Yep.
So that arrow points to the inlets, and there were 2 inlets, and they call them drains. This is board chart's original diagram. You see the dotted line is the conduit itself running underneath the black basalt floor, and he has the whole thing mapped. So they must have, at some point during the archaeological excavations, removed all of the sand enough to where they could trace it to the center of the temple floor and then directly out to the bottom. And the drain, you see the end of the red dotted line goes into a solid red line. That's the remaining part of the conduit that you can actually see.
Okay.
And it goes into the basin down there at the bottom.
Right.
Underneath the black basalt floor.
Right.
So
that's that collection bowl.
Correct.
Thing.
Yeah. So by heating that black basalt floor, you're preventing the coagulation or settling of any dissolved materials that are in your aqueous solution. Because again, think of it as a pipe. If you don't heat that material and keep it flowing smoothly, perhaps it was a viscous solution that if it wasn't hot, it's like clogging up the pipe. So you got to keep it hot to keep it moving through the channel. It may have had dissolved solids that needed to be kept suspended in the solution to prevent loss of your product. So there's several different applications for the heat storage component in keeping that solution hot and moving it through that channel into the final collection bowl. So this is the whole pyramid complex at Abu Sir. Again, it's on a huge outcrop. You can see this bedrock outcrop around the pyramid complex. So it's on an elevated point of land. The Pyramid of Saqqara also has a super sophisticated conduit network that was filled with copper pipes. There was a copper pipe network that was discovered at the Pyramid of Saqqara that runs underneath the floor of the temple. So this is a basalt outcrop, one of the quarries in Egypt for black basalt. And just an interesting note about how you see how the basalt forms in the quarry with these type of formations. They took the basalt from the quarry and replicated that exact same configuration in the final construction. The basalt stones are not shaped in those weird patterns. They took it from the quarry, they numbered them, and then they reorganized the same thing into the exact same pattern in the final construction. Why did they go through all the effort to do that? I have no idea, but that was the methodology for the implementation of black basalt. Was replicating the geological signature of the actual quarry site. Mm-hmm. Really, really cool, interesting detail about the construction methodology that was used for this stuff. So again, the drain goes all the way underneath the black basalt floor. You're keeping the solution hot, preventing it from clogging up the drain before it gets deposited into your collection bowl. So again, here you can see the original diagrams and how the black basalt was replicated to how it was extracted in the quarry. Oh, here's the original diagram. So the dotted line I'm assuming from his diagram, is where he loses. So you can see the top arrow pointing at the top left. That's the inlet. And he goes into a dotted line, which I'm assuming is where he possibly loses traces of it. And this was Borchardt was the original archaeologist that excavated this in the 1800s. May have been, I think it was 1800s, maybe early 1900s. Again, the lightning heating up the black basalt, keeping the system warm, preventing coagulation of the material. That's the conduit as it pops back up into the collection bowl. This is a LiDAR scan of the collection bowl. We have a good collection of LiDAR scans. Mm-hmm. Again, Giza Plateau itself is one of these cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators. And an interesting correlation to the geometry of the Great Pyramid, it has the exact geometry that is required to perceive a rainbow. Again, communication encoded in the structures, telling you that it's connected to thunderstorms, rain, and lightning. I think that's a beautiful implementation of this symbolic communication, telling you through the geometry that this structure is connected to thunderstorms, rain, and lightning. And it just so happens that the 52-degree slope angle of the Great Pyramid is the ideal vector for the wind shear that's required to create the convection in the atmosphere for generating a cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. Randall Carlson talked about that. He made one tiny little throwaway mention of this modern thunderstorm generator machine. He said that 52 degrees is the exact injection angle that they utilize in the machine to create their modern thunderstorm generator. And he completely missed the whole point of the Giza Pyramid. It's literally not a modern emissions cleaning machine. The Great Pyramid, the Giza Plateau itself, is a white horse cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator. 52 degrees. It's the exact same injection angle that they use in the machine. And he touched on, it was such a brief throwaway. I believe in the conversation he had here, he said 52 degrees was the exact angle. It's the exact angle required to produce a thunderstorm in terms of the ideal vector of hot air circulation into the atmosphere.
Wow.
Encoded into the Great Pyramid. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Saqqara, the function of the Egyptian pyramids. Finally.
Okay.
So the buildup to the whole thing.
Yep.
And hopefully now you can see why it's super important for me to establish these connections. Because I can't jump right into saying, oh, the Egyptian pyramids are lightning-powered chemical reactors without providing some context and some evidence to support that. Again, I'm not going to make these wilds. Lightning-powered chemical reactors is a wild statement.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's out there.
It's not even, again, even in laser beams and UFOs,
yeah,
lightning-powered chemical reactors is on up there in the scale.
It's up there with Jesus's bones
Sure, right?
or whatever.
Yeah. But as you can see in the process of laying the foundation, there's a lot of evidence that connects this.
Yeah.
With the passage chamber reactors, Newgrange being the earliest implementation of encased structure chemical reactors. They were proto-pyramids. So again, it's the evolution of the technology with stone circles and passage chamber reactors being the dawn and the genesis of the technology. And it was taken to its apex execution in Egypt, where they built the best of these chemical reactors. Teotihuacan is a similar implementation. The Coromanta Pyramid in Japan, similar implementation. But the best ones they ever built were in Egypt. So now, the Egyptian pyramid chemical manufacturing sequence. I don't have the step pyramid on here, but red pyramid, producing aqueous ammonia. The bent pyramid, transforming that aqueous ammonia into solid urea or ammonium carbonate. We'll talk about the difference between those two things. Great pyramid, producing sulfuric acid, and the central pyramid, producing hydrochloric acid. Step pyramid complex in Saqqara, and methane. So sacred flames. So at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about subterranean natural resources that include gas deposits. So there's these things called sacred flames, these methane gas seeps that were the source of sacred ancient sites around the Middle East and Mediterranean. The oracle at Delphi was a natural gas methane seep. And these natural gas methane seeps, no surprise, are often ignited by lightning strikes, because we established a connection that telluric currents flow more profoundly near these subterranean natural resources. Methane gas is escaping, seeping up through the bedrock, and it's ignited by lightning that creates these burning eternal flames that were the source of worship for many ancient religions around the Middle East and Mediterranean. So this is a high carbon limestone bedrock cap of an underground methane deposit. So bedrock methane deposits form from decaying organic matter that's trapped in the bedrock that produces methane gas that builds up in the bedrock. That's how natural gas forms. This is high carbon limestone bedrock that is the cap of an underground methane seep, methane deposit. See that black high carbon limestone? This is the bedrock inside the step pyramid. And I highly encourage you to go to Saqqara and go in the entrance into the step pyramid and look at the transition between regular limestone into the black high carbon limestone that is at the core of the central pyramid. This isn't soot staining either. This is the high carbon limestone bedrock from which the chambers of the step pyramid were excavated. An indication that the step pyramid is built right on top of a bedrock methane deposit. Step pyramid being designed to extract this bedrock deposit of methane. On the left, you have a modern fracking apparatus where water is pumped into the subterranean coal bed that holds this methane gas and extracted by increasing and decreasing the pressure of water being pumped into the subterranean gas deposit. I'll show you now exactly how the step pyramid does the same thing. So we talked about the function of the pyramid body. Step pyramid originally started as a single level platform. The pyramid body itself gradually added layers to maintain the pressure inside of the system. So let's say, for example, there was a gas leak. They discovered there was a gas leak coming out of the first layer. So we need to keep the pressure inside the system. We also don't want our methane gas leaking out into the atmosphere. So they added more layers. The step pyramid that was originally a single level platform eventually became a stepped pyramid. Did you hear about this paper about the hydraulic apparatus that was used to build the step pyramid?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Okay. So this paper, in the paper, it talks about a structure called Giza el-Mudir. 2 years ago, I proposed a hypothesis for the structure of Giza el-Mudir as a water treatment facility. Then this paper comes along, maybe about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. It's probably 3 years ago when I made my Giza el-Mudir video. I was the only person who had ever mentioned Giza el-Mudir. And my hypothesis that I presented in the episode is that Giza el-Mudir was a water treatment facility that utilized the Nile River flooding and purified the water within this giant reservoir. It's a huge rectangular enclosure that was used for treating water. So this is the paper on the possible use of hydraulic force, and it talks about here the function of Giza el-Mudir as a unified hydraulic system that improves water quality. This is their diagram showing Giza el-Mudir as a check dam and the flooding of the Nile River flowing into the dam itself, and then the facility used as water purifier. Way back 3 years ago, I made this diagram showing the exact same thing. The flood channels of the Nile River leading into Giza el-Mudir, and the entire thing working as a water purification facility. So ideas that I proposed 3 years ago that no one had ever mentioned, no one's ever even talked about this structure, have now been corroborated in an academic paper I would almost guarantee you these people know about my work. But they utilized the same principle in a paper about the construction of the step pyramid, not about the function of the step pyramid. Conventional academics will not touch the function. They'll talk about construction, but they will not talk about function. They also use all of the same mechanisms of operation that I proposed several years ago regarding the function of the step pyramid in this paper about the construction of the step pyramid, specifically the connection into the external reservoir. So let me go back here a second. You see the Djoser complex in pink? It's surrounded by a huge trench. They call it a dry moat. I was the first person to propose that it wasn't a dry moat, it's an actual reservoir. So the purified water from Giza El Mudir was transferred into the reservoir surrounding the step pyramid complex, and it was introduced into the subterranean system through the tunnels that are shown here, the ones going out to the side. This team that wrote this paper corroborated this hypothesis about the connection between the subterranean tunnels and the external reservoir surrounding the step pyramid. So I was happy when I saw this paper, but also extremely frustrated because I proposed all of these mechanisms of operation several years ago. And you can look at the dates of any of my work on the step pyramid or Giza El Mudir, predates this by years. And now they're coming up with the same ideas, but they're using it to describe the construction. So you see here the dry moat surrounding the step pyramid filled with water. This is coming from their academic peer-reviewed paper. And the connection, see here the connection to the Great Trench, these two shafts, A and B, that connect into the subterranean system below the step pyramid. This was corroborated by the Latvian scientific mission to Saqqara that actually did GPR. It's one of the first GPR scanning projects that's ever been done in Egypt. Latvian scientific mission to Saqqara discovered all of these underground connections. You can see the pipe here. They're calling it a pipe. Pipe discovered by the Latvian scientific mission in 2007 that connects the reaction chamber system below the step pyramid into the southern tomb.
Here, you're saying that's not a water tunnel. That's not a walking tunnel. That's a water pipe.
A pipe, yeah. Correct. Yeah, that links these two systems. So here, again, this is one of my original diagrams showing the external enclosure filled with water. These two orange shafts connect directly into the external reservoir that's above ground. All of this stuff is all below ground, inside of the pyramid itself. So now we're looking at the subterranean system below the step pyramid. So water flows from the external reservoir into the subterranean system. So that's what we have here.
And you're saying no aliens were involved in the manufacture of this?
This is human technology. Human technology.
Okay.
Using Earth's natural resources to excavate bedrock methane.
And this is impressive shit for back in.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
Just the beginning.
Okay.
And then what you do is increase and decrease the pressure in your fracking system. So by raising and lowering these vertical shaft pumps, so first step is fill it with water. That's going to increase the pressure in the deposit. Then you raise the pumps, it decreases the pressure and allows methane, which I have there in yellow, to fill the rectangular central chamber. The process is repeated, raising and lowering the pressure in the system, increasing the pressure and decreasing the pressure within the gas deposit to extract and pump out this methane. So this is the step pyramid in operation here.
Ryan, you're going aliens too, right? I'm assuming.
100%. People can't do this. Only aliens can.
Yeah. Okay.
So here's the southern tomb and this rectangular container inside of the southern tomb. You see that plug? This is a huge red granite container. And it has a plug in the top of the container. It's a feathered plug that has a rim that goes around the outside of it so that you can pop that plug out and then stick it back in. Inside of this container, this is from a paper by, I think it was Mark Lehner, talking how they found traces of copper on the inside of this thing. So the interior of this granite plugged container was lined with copper metal. It's a gas container. It's a copper gas container that had a plug that allowed reserves of the methane to be stored. And then you can percolate methane up through the water, because if you release that plug, the methane is going to percolate out of that. It's going to bubble up. Percolation means passing gas through water, bubbling gas through water. That's percolation. That's a way that you can purify gases, is by bubbling gas through water. You remove contaminants from your methane. So the Southern Tomb is a percolation methane gas purification apparatus. Okay, so again, why choose copper? Perfect for gas storage. So applications for methane. Domestic applications, heating, lighting, methane lamps. Another explanation for why they don't find torch soot all over the inside of these things, methane lamps. So also industrial chemical synthesis. So it's a syngas. Methane is a syngas for the production of hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, etc. My hypothesis for the function of the pyramid of Wenese is that it was taking that methane gas and converting it into methanol. Again, the Saqqara pyramid complex is an industrial hydrocarbon processing complex that includes the Serapeum for the production of hydrogen and oxygen. You can also use methane flame for metallurgical applications, high temperature flame for processing and working with metal. So after the bedrock deposit of methane was tapped, the step pyramid could have been implemented into a biogas fermentation chamber where they were using cow manure, agricultural surplus material, and water to create methane gas. It's called anaerobic digestion. Very similar process to what we use today in modern biogas digesters, which is also directly connected to two esoteric symbols within the dynastic Egyptian religion, the Apis bull, the sacred bull, right? Cow manure contains the bacteria that digests the agricultural material to create methane. The scarab beetle that I just got you, the scarab is a dung collecting beetle, which is an esoteric symbol for the first stage of methane gas production. You got to collect the dung. That's why the scarab was a sacred esoteric symbol within the dynastic Egyptian religion. The dynastic Egyptian pantheon of symbols and deities has superficial layers of interpretation and then deeper layers that were intended for initiates into the sacred knowledge of chemistry. So the conventional explanation for the scarab is that rolling this dung ball around represents life, death, rebirth, and resurrection. A beetle rolling around a ball of turds.
I'm not getting all that out of it.
That's Khepri, right? The solar cycle of life, death, rebirth, and resurrection because of this dung rolling beetle. That's what they say it represents.
Seems like a stretch. Yeah.
It's practical. It's telling you that one way to make methane is to collect some dung, and then you can put that in a container and you can produce methane gas. Again, Pyramid of Wenese, the crystal pyramid, using methane to produce methanol, an industrial solvent. So let's go back to the Serapeum. I think you had some questions about the function of the Serapeum. So let me take a little bit more time and do this correctly. Okay, sonication of hydrogen. Sonohydrogen. This research paper talks about a new approach where they are using ultrasound waves in liquid water to break down the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. This is a demonstrated process that we can use. You have a solution, you send ultrasound waves into the solution, it breaks down the water molecules, releasing hydrogen and oxygen, bubbles. Here's another approach, just describing the reaction that happens. The impact of the ultrasound waves leads to the formation of hydrogen molecules. This is how it happens. You're breaking down or disassociating the water molecule by using ultrasound. We talked about the Sphinx step-down transformer reducing the voltage. This is a diagram that shows the Sphinx avenue leading from the Bubastion down there at the bottom, and the Serapeum is at the top. So the Serapeum is connected into one of these Sphinx step-down voltage transformer systems that were allocating voltage into specific areas of these reaction chamber systems. So we're sending voltage into the Serapeum. This is the Bubastion. You can see here on this topographic map that this area in the Serapeum, or in the Bubastion, is the highest point of elevation in the Saqqara complex. Perfect location for the obelisk. Voltage being sent into the Serapeum. Okay, this is the entrance into the Serapeum that has tons of evidence of water erosion flowing into the structure. The entire thing looks like it's been filled with water and over and over and over and over again. Fill it with water.
Looks like it's been filled with water, but the last time that it rained there was like, in a significant way, was like 5,000 BC or something like that.
Well, so we're not necessarily using rainwater. Remember, we have a water treatment facility in Saqqara that was producing pure water. So you take the Nile River, an abundant source of water, you purify it in the Giza El Mudir water treatment facility that supplies all of the purified water for the manufacturing operations. So the water comes from the Nile.
Okay.
Purified in Giza El Mudir water treatment, and then introduced into the reservoir surrounding the Serapeum that could be introduced into the system when you are ready to run the ritual. So we have these housings that have these huge containers made of granite. You're filling the system with water. The voltage goes into the box. Again, this is instantaneous transmission of voltage. When the lightning strikes, it goes immediately and is not constant voltage. It's literally instantaneous transmission into the system. You know, bolt of lightning is like that, and then the electricity is gone. So you have to send it into a system that has dielectric materials that can store that electric field long enough for the chemical reaction to occur. So you induce voltage in these red granite containers. That just represents activation of the electric field in the dielectric. It's going to generate ultrasound that's resonating from the box. Those ultrasound waves flowing through the water are going to break down the water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The gases will raise into the upper portion of the Serapeum, and there's channels that run out of each one of the housings and connects into the main channel that runs up. Again, I talked about the slope angle of the Serapeum. It starts at a low angle at the bottom near where the drain tunnel is, and the whole system slopes upward toward the entrance, which allows the gases to flow through this channel at the top of the tunnel system, collecting the gases. And when you want to do the final extraction, all you have to do is fill the whole thing with water completely, and it will push that bubble up through the entire system out of the tunnels. So again, we have more gases building up. There's a channel system that is carved from the housings that runs up the entire center of the tunnel. And I would love to, it may actually work out when we're back in Egypt simultaneously. Hopefully, it coincides with the scheduling of your mission, where I will also be back in Egypt, and I would love to go with you.
Cool.
And we can see all of this stuff in person. And I have several Sunday site visits where I do Sunday site visits where we actually go to the sites and I show physical evidence of all this stuff on my channel. And I'm the only one that's talked about the channels at the top of this tunnel system. There's channels that connect the bilateral housings with the central channel that runs up the top. And that was utilized to remove the hydrogen and oxygen to a collection system that was on top of the Serapeum. There's nothing there now. But I would bet money on it that there was originally a structure on top of that. That was the collection vessel for the hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, red pyramid. So step pyramid extracting methane. Red pyramid. Look at all the staining on the inside of the red pyramid. Specifically, see that wave formation in the lower bottom left-hand corner?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is in the southeastern corner of the chamber. All sorts of staining all throughout this thing. I saw this in 2017, so my first artifact that I saw was the collection bowl of Abu Sir. The next day we go to the Red Pyramid. Didn't know we were going inside the Red Pyramid. I walked inside, saw all of this staining covering the walls. And it gets more dense and dark toward the upper portion of the reaction chambers. And I started looking at this converging upper vault, right? Communication encoded in the pyramids, this converging vault. So when I got home from that 2017 trip, I started to think about reverse engineering the structure. So what would happen when you fill this thing with water? And if you put gas inside of the chamber and you fill the chamber with water, it's going to increase the temperature and pressure of the gas. So by reducing volume of a gas, you increase temperature and pressure. Right? So if we have a gas that's in this volume and we reduce the volume to this, the pressure of the gas is going to go up and the temperature is going to increase. It's a basic mechanism of operation for facilitating chemical reactions, increasing temperature and pressure. So again, there's communication encoded in the engineering of these structures. So we have here a diagram of the modern Haber process, which is the modern industrial scale chemical manufacturing process for creating ammonia. This is the original apparatus designed by Fritz Haber in the early 1900s for the production of ammonia. You see the three chambers that are all connected via tubes. You see that the third chamber is a little bit bigger than the first two, and it's elevated above the level of the first two.
Okay.
Okay?
Going from left to right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or going from right to left.
Right
First
to
chamber,
left.
second chamber, third chamber. The one on the left is just, it's on a higher platform.
Got it. Right. Yep.
Okay? Here's the configuration of the chambers of the Red Pyramid. First chamber, second chamber, connected by connecting shafts, i.e. tubes. And the third and final synthesis chamber is on an elevated platform above the other ones. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same configuration. Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch both traveled to Egypt. They were engineers that were actively studying the Egyptian pyramids. And I think that he made the same discovery that I came across, reverse engineered the Red Pyramid, and came up with the modern Haber process for manufacturing industrial scale ammonia. The exact same reaction process too. So the first one is your primary steam reformer, second one secondary air reformer, third one final synthesis chamber, where the first chamber takes methane gas that was being extracted by the step pyramid, and it mixes it with water, specifically steam in this primary steam reformer, to create hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The first one on the right. Second stage of the reaction, the hydrogen from the first chamber and the carbon monoxide are reacted in the secondary air reformer with air and oxygen and nitrogen from the air. The carbon dioxide is eliminated, and I'll show you exactly how that's eliminated. That leaves us with hydrogen and nitrogen, and the hydrogen and nitrogen are converted in the final synthesis chamber into gaseous ammonia. That gaseous ammonia is then dissolved into water to create an aqueous ammonia solution, gas dissolved in water. That is a huge difference between our modern industrial scale ammonia process, which creates liquid ammonia, which is ammonia gas that has been supercooled until it condenses into liquid ammonia. The ancient technology was aqueous ammonia, gas dissolved into water. Huge difference. Super important to understand. We talked about Ammon, the deity of fertility. He is the fertilizer god. And Ammon is the etymological root word for our modern word for ammonia. He is the fertilizer deity. So here we have the chambers of the Red Pyramid. The Red Pyramid is literally capturing lightning in a bottle. So again, we talked about the evolution of the technology, how lightning creates a chemical reaction in the air that creates nitrate fertilizers. They implemented this technology to its apex execution and were able to capture the electric fields from lightning and utilize them for the chemical reactions inside the Red Pyramid. Capturing lightning in a bottle, same atmospheric chemical reaction. The number one application for these ammonia fertilizers, agricultural. Okay, so let's start with the primary steam reformer.
What is the traditional explanation for those three chambers right there? Is it just like one's like just to throw off grave robbers and
yeah. Okay, so let me talk about the pyramids of Seneferu.
Yeah.
Okay, so Step Pyramid, 3rd dynasty, the Pyramid of Djoser. The beginning of the 4th dynasty is Seneferu. He was the father, again, I apologize to any dynastic Egyptian scholars out there. Seneferu was the father of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, successive generations. So he was the beginning of the 4th dynasty. Seneferu built 3 pyramids, the Pyramid of Maidum in the Fayum Oasis, the Bent Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid. Seneferu moved more stone in ancient Egypt than any other pharaoh in terms of his construction projects. The Pyramid of Maidum had a catastrophic collapse. The outside fell down and it left this stepped core. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Pyramid of Maidum. That was also built by the pharaoh Seneferu. Then the story goes, according to the conventional timeline, Seneferu built the Bent Pyramid. The Bent Pyramid was an architectural failure. He wasn't satisfied with the interior of the Bent Pyramid. So then he built the Red Pyramid, all in his lifetime, all 3 pyramid structures, with the Red Pyramid supposedly being the final resting place of the pharaoh Seneferu. That's the conventional story. They don't go into any explanation of the chambers in conventional dynastic rhetoric.
They're just there.
And something about Egypt, the Egyptian tour guides cannot go inside the pyramids. They are not allowed to take tour guests into the pyramids, period. Your Egyptian tour guide will wait on the outside, send you in, you go in by yourself, and you come back out.
Why?
Too many questions and too many unanswered questions. It's also, from the logistics standpoint, they don't want a bunch of tour guides in there pointing around and taking up time and clogging up the system. They want people to go in as fast as possible. For example, if you go to the Great Pyramid during the day on any tour, your Egypt guide will wait for you on the outside. He'll send you inside. You go up, you look around, and you come right back down, along with 500 other people that are in there during the day. It's a madhouse, which is why I don't go during public hours anymore. I wait till we get special permissions for my tours when we go in at night and we go in private into all 3 chambers. So there is no conventional explanation for the 3 chambers in terms of the pharaonic burial hypothesis.
Okay. So your theory might sound crazy, but it's literally up against nothing, right? I mean, there's no theory for what these chambers' functionality could be.
And I'm the only person that talks about the function of the Red Pyramid too.
Right.
Now, again, I'm not trying to speak negatively about Dunn. Again, he's the pioneer. He's the godfather of the function of the pyramids. Doesn't even bother to touch all the rest of these structures. Yeah. I don't mean this as a brag, but I have proposed more hypotheses for the function of ancient structures around the world than anyone else. There's no one else that's touching all of the stuff that I've mentioned, even in today's podcast.
Yeah. That's
No-
why
no
you're
one.
the most requested name that I've had on the show
yeah,
since
that's
I
awesome.
started the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think I made this point at the beginning. You have to look at the system as a whole. Otherwise, you're missing the big picture. That's why it's so important for me to preface all of this pyramid stuff with all of the supporting evidence and the development and evolution of the technology that got us here. Because I don't think it was aliens that came down and started building pyramids, and there's nothing leading up to that. I see an evolution of technology during the Neolithic period that culminated in the building of the Egyptian pyramids over thousands of years. So we're talking about stone circles around 10,000 BC. Let's see, these things are built around 8,500 BC. So you got 2,000 years of technological development. Look how far we've come in 300 years. Imagine what a civilization can do in 2,000 years in the development from stone circles and passage chamber reactors into the Egyptian pyramids. In the Pyramid of Meidum, for example, it was a test pyramid. It was an engineering project that was designed to model and test the physics and chemistry that would later be implemented into the Red Pyramid. It was a catastrophic failure. The whole thing fell down. That's why they built it out in the Fayum Oasis, because it wasn't ever intended to be integrated as a functional part of the industrial chemical manufacturing system of Lower Egypt. So they built it in the middle of nowhere because it was just a test structure. It was never supposed to work. So there is even engineering evolution in the design of the Egyptian pyramids. So again, we talked about the function of the pyramid body developed at the Pyramid of Saqqara, maintaining internal pressure, preventing atmospheric contamination and leaking of gases into the atmosphere. Stabilization of the internal reaction chambers is going to apply to the Red Pyramid because these are not standalone chambers. Right? You can't have a big shaft going up into the air that doesn't have a mass of stone surrounding it. It has to be encased in something to hold the whole thing together. The final chamber is also way up in the air. It has to have a mass of stone surrounding it that are encasing and supporting the internal reaction chamber systems that are also maintaining the pressure inside of the system to keep the whole thing from exploding. And I'll show you, I did mathematical calculations that demonstrate the temperature and pressure capabilities of the Red Pyramid chambers. Okay, so this is the inlet right here. It's been patched over with modern concrete, but this is the inlet that was used to introduce the methane gas into the primary steam reformer. It is in the northwestern corner of the pyramid, and here you can see a bunch of the staining on the inside of the Red Pyramid. This weird drip staining. Conventional explanation is that this is from bats. There's no bats in here. And I've been in tons of other structures, for example, Mastaba 17, next to the Pyramid of Meidum in the Fayum Oasis, where there's tons of bats in there, no staining on the walls like this. And now we have chemical analysis of this staining material that proves exactly what it is and has absolutely nothing to do with bats. Okay, so again, the staining that we have here on the lower portion, you see this wave pattern where it crashes up into the southwestern corner and then it circles back around the bottom of the chamber. And you can see that the dark staining flows from the top. It's very nebulous and condensed in the upper portion of the reaction chamber. And then it flows through that connecting passage into the next chamber. See how the gases move from the top to the bottom through the connecting passage? The flow pattern?
Maybe. I'm not sure what candidly what you're.
Okay, so if you look at the top of the upper vault and just follow that line down through the connecting passage, you can see dark staining that moves from the upper part down through the connecting shaft.
Okay.
There's fluid dynamics staining all throughout the Red Pyramid that are indicative of the flow of gases through the system. Yeah, the staining patterns. The Red Pyramid is the smoking gun of this hypothesis.
Okay.
Because it has the most physical evidence inside of the structure that there were fluid dynamics involved in these processes. Okay, so again, we have the crashing wave pattern in the lower portion of the chamber.
Is that the same room?
Same room, same primary
Right.
steam reformer, the first
Yep.
chamber. Yep, so it crashes up into the southwestern wall, it circles back, and now we're looking at the northeastern wall on the right-hand side. So this wave pattern crashes up in one corner, and then it crashes up in the next corner. So we've actually demonstrated this in a model where we introduced water into a chamber with the same dimensions as the bottom of the red pyramid. This rectangular container here is a rudimentary model of the bottom of the red pyramid. The models are going to get more sophisticated. You'll see in here in just a second. But this is just a demonstration of the fluid dynamics. So Ryan, if you would, play video number 1 for me. Okay, so when you introduce water through the inlet shaft, it crashes up into that corner of the container. It flows back around and it crashes up into the other adjacent corner of the container. This is the exact same flow pattern that we see in the lower portion of the red pyramid. This crashing wave pattern, it's from the filling process that was filling the chamber with water.
Okay.
I'll show you another more advanced model when we get in here later, but you can see it kind of crashing up into that corner. It rotates around the container and it crashes up into the adjacent corner. Just a demonstration of the fluid dynamics. This isn't showing anything else at this point. It's just a comparable dimension container showing what happens when you pump in water through the inlet shaft, which I'll show you where that is in just a sec, into the lower portion of the chamber to begin the filling process.
Okay.
Okay. So you see at the bottom of the descending shaft, there's a hole down there.
Yep.
That is the inlet where water was introduced into the reaction chamber system, creating that crashing wave pattern that was demonstrated in this little model. And we have a whole series of rudimentary setups that were the development of this model that I'll show you in just a minute. A full-scale, immaculate model of the red pyramid that proves basically all of the concepts that I'm going to lay out here regarding the manipulation of temperature and pressure and the function of the pyramid body. So remember the discussion about the function of the pyramid body because it's going to come up here in just a second. So step 1, fill the chambers with water. You're going to fill the chamber with water until the water level has raised to the height of the connecting shaft, right? So the connecting shaft between the two chambers is now filled with water. This is going to set the initial temperature and pressure conditions inside the first reactor because now it's sealed with water. There's nothing going in and nothing going out except what comes in through the inlet shaft. So you introduce methane gas through the inlet shaft into the reformer. The methane gas will rise into the upper vault of the primary steam reformer, filling the chamber with methane gas. Step number 2. Oh, I don't like the way this rendered, but anyway, it is what it is. I set this up in PowerPoint, and when we extrapolated it into Google Slides, it shows all of my drawing marks. That's not the way it looks in the normal presentation, but you get the idea. Fill it more with water. That is going to compress the water insoluble methane gas into the upper portion of the reaction vault. You're compressing the volume of the gas, increasing the temperature and pressure. Okay, so we're increasing the temperature and pressure in the primary steam reformer, raising the water level, compressing the methane gas into the top of the primary steam reformer. This is a process known as adiabatic compression. Adiabatic means that there's no heat exchange in the system. So there's nothing really to dissipate the heat of this process. So I did some calculations regarding, so there's a couple things to cover here first. Adiabatic compression, no heat exchange. So limestone is not a good material for dissipating heat. So in these limestone reaction chambers, when you're compressing that methane gas into the upper portion of the reaction chamber, all the heat's going to stay inside of the chamber. That's the definition of adiabatic compression. So you're not losing any heat in this reaction process. And the red pyramid was actually designed to utilize electric fields. Again, we talked about limestone being a material for storing electric fields for all of the processes. This is talking about electric field driven steam reformer. So the primary steam reformer is converting methane and steam into hydrogen and carbon monoxide, which can be driven by electric fields in the presence of catalyst materials. So this is a chemical analysis breakdown of the samples of the staining inside of the red pyramid. These are all of the different metals that were discovered in this chemical analysis. The primary constituents being iron, strontium, zirconium, cesium. There's also nickel, zinc, all sorts of different metals.
Mostly iron, though.
Mostly iron, correct. But strontium, nickel, all of these are going to be applicable, as you'll see here in just a moment. So we took a bunch of samples of this staining material, proving that it has absolutely nothing to do with bats. The red pyramid was built with a specific type of stone that has a very high content of naturally occurring metal minerals. Again, we're talking about implementation of specific construction materials for various applications. The red pyramid was built with very specific type of limestone that's different than all the rest of the pyramids, which is why it's called the red pyramid, because the core limestone blocks have a very high concentration of iron. Iron being the primary catalyst for the Haber-Bosch process. So this stone had all of the right catalyst material in it naturally to facilitate and catalyze these chemical reactions. Okay, this is another study talking about nickel catalysts utilized in the methane steam reformer reaction. Nickel, another metal that was found in the chemical analysis of the red pyramid staining. This is another area of the chamber that experienced incredibly high heat and temperature fluctuation that has liquefied zinc and lead here in this area of the reaction chamber. You can see the incredibly dense staining in this portion of the chamber. It was the area that had the highest temperature and pressure fluctuations in the entire system, and I'll explain why that's the case in just a minute. But we have liquefied zinc and lead coming out of the stone in that area in this sample. So this is one of the housings inside the secondary air reformer, the second chamber of the red pyramid. There's bilateral housings on both sides of the chamber that were housings for a one-way valve. I see you're soaking it all in, so I'm going to take my time with this. And if I'm going too fast or if I need to explain anything more, we'll come back to all of this in just a second in the diagrams and models, because I have a full-scale animation and model that's going to show all this stuff.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to see how it
So
works.
these are housings for a one-way valve. You can see there's chisel marks inside of there. Something was removed out of those housings.
Okay.
In the top of this chamber. So to melt lead and zinc, you need temperatures that are, above 330 or above 420 Celsius. And we'll talk about the missing component here in just a second, a one-way pressure-actuated valve that allowed the gases to be introduced into the final synthesis chamber. So this is an introduction into the study that revealed that the Great Pyramid can focus electromagnetic energy. We talked about limestone, a dielectric material whose primary application in the function of the Egyptian pyramids is for storing and concentrating electric fields. The Great Pyramid was designed to concentrate electric fields around the red granite king's chamber and antechamber. I would hypothesize that the red pyramid has the exact same electric field concentration capabilities, but with the specific geometry of each different structure has different slope angles, different sizes. They did that to concentrate the electric fields around different reaction chambers. That's why they're all the same shape, but little bit different slope angles and sizes. is it shifts the concentration of the electric fields to specific areas within the structure. And I'll get into much greater depth on this study in just a minute. This is some of the results that show the electric field concentration. In the center there on the right, you can see the electric field measurements, blue being the low, 3 being the highest, the red. This is the concentration of electric fields around the King's Chamber and Antechamber inside of the Great Pyramid. Okay, an introduction to electric field chemistry. I talked about the storage of electric fields at the beginning, one of the main properties of limestone. The primary construction material for all of the Egyptian pyramids is limestone. And electric fields are another way to facilitate chemical reactions. This is just a series of different papers that talk about electric field intensified chemical processes and reaction chemistry, where you can utilize electric fields to facilitate chemical reactions. This is why they use limestone. This is why the pyramids have the ability to concentrate electric fields around the reaction chambers, is to facilitate chemical reactions. Okay, this is another one talking about electromagnetic field enables ammonia synthesis at low temperatures. They found that by using electric fields, you can create the Haber-Bosch process at initiation temperatures of 100 degrees Celsius. So by using electromagnetic fields, you can create a very complex chemical reaction at much lower temperatures than we use in our modern day reaction system. So normally today, the Haber-Bosch ammonia synthesis reaction requires temperatures above 500 degrees Celsius. But by introducing electric fields, you can reduce the temperature from 500 to 100. This paper, electromagnetic field, enables ammonia synthesis at low temperatures. This is why the Egyptian pyramids have the ability to concentrate electric and magnetic fields to drive and catalyze chemical reactions. This is another article, The Elucidation of the Role of Electric Field on Low Temperature Ammonia Synthesis Using Isotopes, where they utilized induced electric fields over a strontium-based catalyst to facilitate the chemical reaction. Strontium being the second highest concentrated metal found in the chemical analysis of the staining from the Red Pyramid. So we have high iron concentration, the primary catalyst. We have strontium being the second highest concentration, being the primary catalyst utilized in this electric field-induced ammonia synthesis reaction. It has everything that you need to create this chemical reaction at a lower temperature than we use in our modern day industrial synthesis, including the metal catalyst material. This is, I don't like to say proven, extremely compelling evidence provided by the chemical analysis data. People say it's from bats, but it has iron, strontium, nickel, zinc, all of the catalysts that are required. It's called extrusions. They're geological extrusions that happen during the heating and pressurizing of the chamber. You heat that stone up, it gets hot, and the metal material extrudes out of the stone as the temperature and pressure fluctuates within the chamber. This is just a blown up diagram of this electric field ammonia synthesis over the strontium-based catalyst. Strontium and zirconium, both of which were found in the chemical analysis.
So the aliens flew in that thing.
And landed it here.
Yeah.
So ammonia is also a rocket fuel.
Okay.
And that's one of the... So at any time I talk about ammonia, they're like, it's rocket fuel for the aliens.
Yeah.
You know, that's the number one.
Right.
You know, I talk about fertilizers. Right. But people immediately jump to alien rocket fuel because we use ammonia now for rocket fuel.
Right.
So 100%. So this is just a microscope slide showing the samples that were taken, close up of the crystalline material. And again, the full breakdown that has strontium, zirconium, cesium, iron, all of the metals that we talk about in this catalyst discussion are found in the chemical analysis of the staining from inside the Red Pyramid. So here we have iron, the concentration of strontium. There's also stuff like thorium, uranium that we found in here. Very, very small concentrations, but there are some heavy metal radioactive. You see TH and U, that's thorium and uranium concentration.
So pardon my ignorance, but
Yeah.
after it gets pressurized
Yeah.
at the top of that first chamber,
Yep.
what happens next?
Fantastic question.
Okay.
That's exactly what happens next.
Okay.
Next stage in the reaction process.
Uh-huh.
So we increase the temperature and pressure inside of the primary reaction chamber that transforms the meniscus layer of water into steam, heats it up, creates steam. The steam reacts with the hydrogen under that high temperature and pressure and catalyst metal material inside of the chamber and creates a chemical reaction that generates hydrogen and carbon monoxide. So that's the next stage of the reaction. This is just an introduction to those papers that I mentioned before. Alexandre Kasianchuk. Again, for people that are saying, oh, this is nonsense, there's absolutely no academic support for this. People have written papers, qualified individuals, PhD in mathematics and physics, wrote a full paper basically extolling the virtues of my research on the Red Pyramid, specifically regarding the concentrations of methane and deposits of methane located along the Nile River, and my discussion about temperature and pressure manipulation in regard to the Red Pyramid as a comparison to the modern Haber-Bosch process. Full paper that he wrote on there. Again, this is the article by Andy Hall saying Drumm presents a thesis that the ancient structures were chemical processing plants used to produce chemical solutions for mining and crop fertilizer. How mundane, yet sensible. The ancients weren't communicating with aliens, spirits, stars, or the dead, but were actually making nitrates to fertilize their crops and acids to solution mine and process metals. Of course they were, just like we do and every other society one cares to look at throughout history. This was a huge compliment to me that Andy took the time to write this whole article and blog regarding my work. And I take mundane as a compliment because it is indicative of a practical application for the Egyptian pyramids, which they absolutely were. Chemical infrastructure projects. It may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but it makes a lot of sense. He also fully agrees with my idea about the power sources from lightning and telluric currents. Wrote a huge article talking about how this is technically viable and published a video. Again, shout out Andy. Can't recommend Andy enough. He made a huge video called Megalithic Chemistry on the Thunderbolts channel, the Electric Universe channel, talking about the virtues of my work. Okay, so primary steam reformer. We've gone through the process here. We're introducing methane gas into the reactor, raising the water level, compressing the methane gas. Okay, temperature and pressure calculations. So this is just going through all the calculations. For anybody that wants to pause this and look at the calculations, I went through a detailed calculation process regarding the adiabatic compression of methane gas in the volume of the red pyramid chamber compressed by water from volume 1 into volume 2.
Okay. Does it move from that first chamber to another chamber?
It does.
Okay.
And I'll explain exactly how that happens in just a minute. Okay. And this is just all of the calculations to show the work, right? This isn't just an arbitrary final answer. I ran this numerous times, and I took the average of these reactions. The red pyramid reaction chambers can generate temperatures of 538 degrees Celsius and 42 atmospheres of pressure. Absolutely staggering numbers. These calculations are for the adiabatic compression of methane gas from volume A into volume B. Simply by doing that, in this adiabatic compression scenario where there's no loss of heat, not significant loss of heat, because some of it is dissipated into the water and transforming the water into steam. Minimal heat loss. 500 degrees Celsius and 40 atmospheres of pressure.
What is 500 degrees Celsius? Is that like 1,400 degrees or 1,200 degrees or something?
I'm not sure about the exact conversion into, I usually think in terms of Celsius, in terms of, so I don't know the conversion off the top of my head. Ryan, maybe you can do that real quick and let us know what that is in Fahrenheit.
Yeah. But it's hot and it's a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah. This is right in the Goldilocks
932
How much?
degrees. 932 degrees.
Fahrenheit,
Okay.
which is right in the Goldilocks zone for the mechanical limits of limestone. If you get above 800 degrees, limestone is going to degrade and decompose into calcium oxide. So it's right in the Goldilocks zone for being below the mechanical threshold of degradation to the actual limestone. So it's low enough temperature that we can still achieve these chemical reactions without damaging the internal reaction chamber system. And I'll show you in just a minute, we have a 1 to 40 scale model replica of the Red Pyramid. The full scale can generate 40 atmospheres of pressure. The 1/40th scale model generated 1 atmosphere of pressure. A direct mathematical corroboration of these calculations in a 1 to 40 scale model, where the model generated 1, the big one generates 40. So 500 degrees Celsius, 40 atmospheres of pressure inside these reaction chambers, right in the Goldilocks zone. Okay. This talks more about the steam reforming of methane, the role of catalysts. Again, we can drive all of these reactions using electric fields and catalyst material. All the right catalysts being found inside of the Red Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid itself being able to concentrate these electric fields around the reaction chambers. The exact same as the Great Pyramid, being able to concentrate electric fields around the King's Chamber and Antechamber. Several papers extolling the process of electric field mediated chemistry. So it's a novel way that we're using in modern chemistry to create chemical reactions using electric fields. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, here's another one. Support effects of catalysis on low temperature methane steam reforming. Low temperatures of around 500 K, methane steam reforming in electric fields was investigated over various catalysts. So they're talking about the same temperature range that we just talked about. This is catalytic steam reforming of methane in electric fields at temperatures of around 423 K. Low temperature hydrogen production, steam reforming in the presence of an electric field. Same thing, this cerium zirconium oxide, low temperature methane metal catalyst in the presence of an electric field. These are just research papers that provide evidence for this electric field and catalyst modified reaction that was occurring in these reaction chambers in the temperature and pressure conditions that we have found mathematically calculated. So it's just a bunch of research papers that show that this reaction is possible. So here you see that this is a cerium zirconium oxide catalyst. We also found cerium and zirconium in the chemical analysis of the Red Pyramid staining. Okay, so now we've got our gas trapped.
Right. Where does it go?
In reaction chamber number 1.
Yep.
Next step,
Yep.
lower the water.
Okay.
So the drain, you see at the bottom of the second chamber, you see that other hole going down? That's the extraction drain shaft
Okay.
leading out of the secondary aeroformer. So I've added the drain here at the bottom of the diagram, and you lower the water. As the water level lowers, it's going to drain toward the second chamber. So the water is continuing to drain toward the second chamber. There's a phenomenon known as adhesion, where there's a tendency for dissimilar molecules to cling to each other. So the gas isn't just going to stick in the top of the chamber. as that water level lowers, the surface adhesion between the gas and the water will facilitate the lowering and extraction of that gas from the upper reaction chamber. You're also draining the water in a directional vector from chamber 1 into chamber 2. Chamber 1 is currently under high pressure. Chamber 2 is under lower pressure because the water is draining out of chamber number 2. So what happens as soon as the aperture opens between chamber 1 and chamber 2? The gases will move along the surface of the water, flowing from chamber 1 into chamber 2 through the connecting passage into the secondary air reformer.
Okay.
Evidence of the fluid dynamics, the staining, moving from the upper vault of the primary steam reformer through the connecting passage into the secondary air reformer. Fluid dynamic staining that's indicative of this reaction process. So that we covered the primary steam reformer. This is just more pictures of the inside of the red pyramid and the condensed staining in the southern wall, because the entire reaction is being pushed south through the structure. The north side is the descending shaft and the primary reaction chamber. Everything moves south toward the final synthesis chamber. And the staining is more dense on the southern side of the reaction chamber than the northern side, because the reaction is being pushed in that direction. This is some of the staining in the upper vault of the primary steam reformer in the southwestern corner. So again, you can see here, particularly on this one on the right, you see that black staining coming from the top of the chamber, going down the corner and through the connecting passage. That is evidence of the fluid dynamics and the movement of gases from chamber 1 into chamber 2. Again, the red pyramid is literally the smoking gun with physical evidence of this fluid dynamic chemical reaction process.
Okay.
Not to mention all the catalyst material and the intense smell of ammonia. The whole thing reeks of ammonia. Again, everybody says it's from bat piss, but anyone that's been on any of my tours or anyone that's been in the red pyramid in Dashur, it smells like pure chemical ammonia, and it's coming from the final synthesis chamber. The smell emanates from the final chamber and permeates the entire structure. So here now we're in the secondary air reformer. You can see that the staining is basically allocated to the upper vault. And there's a very specific delineation of where that nebulous dark staining starts inside of the red pyramid. Okay, this is the southern wall of the secondary air reformer, leading up to the connecting passage that goes into the final synthesis chamber. Okay, so we have our gas here in the top of the secondary air reformer. This is the area you see on the diagram, those holes.
Yeah.
Right at the same level as the connecting passage. This comes into the missing components of the red pyramid, where there was something in that housing. It's a bilateral housing. Here are the holes. You see those holes? And there's chisel marks in those holes where something was chiseled and popped out of those housings. And there's 4. There's 2 on each side. Here you can see the left side of the chamber, those 2 bilateral housings with tons of condensed staining here. This is the other side of the chamber. Again, these bilateral housings with chisel marks where something was popped out. It was a housing for a one-way valve that allowed the unidirectional flow of gases into the final synthesis chamber. So this is a heat exchanger mechanism. So the diagrams of the red pyramid. I don't know why all of these have the configuration wrong. There are no housings in the first chamber. You see on the right side that those holes
Yeah.
in the upper vault of the first chamber, those do not exist.
Okay.
I've shown plenty of video evidence. Every time I go in that chamber, I look up in the upper vault, there are no holes. In the second chamber, there aren't 3 holes, there's only 2 holes. I just showed them. You can see here, there's only 2. And they're on each side of the chamber. There's not 3. I don't know where this discrepancy comes in the creation of this diagram, but it's not correct. There's only 2 holes in the secondary aeroformer, and they are directly connected into the opening of the passage that leads into the final synthesis chamber. This is the area where we have those zinc and lead extrusions and this incredibly dense staining.
So do you think it would have been a metal or something? And do you think it would have been extracted by people and melted down?
Correct. Yeah. Same thing as the missing components from the Great Pyramid. There's something missing from the Grand Gallery. And we'll talk about what I think that is when we get to the Great Pyramid. But again, this drip staining that you see coming out of this area, they took samples of that black material, and it has higher concentrations of zinc and lead, again, naturally occurring, just coming from the stone. But again, you need temperatures of above about 330 or 420 degrees C to be able to liquefy these metals. That falls right in line with the temperature and pressure calculations that show around 500 C and 40 atmospheres of pressure. So the temperature capabilities of the chambers themselves are reflected and corroborated by the presence of these liquefied metals. Again, zinc and lead melting points above 330 or above 420 C to be able to melt these things. So we have the 2 bilateral housings. I think it was a one-way check valve. A pressure-actuated one-way valve that when the pressure in the second chamber got high enough, the valve opened and it allowed the gases to flow from chamber 2 into chamber 3. One-way valve. So now we have the one-way valve installed on the diagram. How does that change the reaction process? So again, as we go through, we're filling our chamber with methane. We raise the water level, compressing the methane into the upper vault of the primary steam reformer. We lower the water. It's going to drain toward the second chamber. We have high pressure system on the right, low pressure system on the left. This is also going to facilitate the movement of the gases from high pressure to low pressure, along with surface adhesion. The gas and water are not just going to separate. As the water level lowers, surface adhesion dictates that gas clings to the surface of the water. And the water is draining from the first chamber toward the second chamber, pulling those gases through the connecting shaft into the upper vault of the secondary aeroformer. So now we have hydrogen and carbon monoxide inside the secondary aeroformer of the Red Pyramid. Again, I apologize for the extended explanation. People want a short answer for the function of the Egyptian pyramids. My episode on the Red Pyramid that I just put out a full compilation. It's about 3.5 hours to get through all the research, explaining the function of just one structure. These are complicated structures that have in-depth, step-by-step mechanisms of operation that take a while to explain. So now, here in the secondary aeroformer, we have hydrogen and carbon monoxide. We raise the water level again. Our one-way valve is allowing the pressure in the secondary aeroformer and the temperature to be the exact same as what we have in the first chamber, because now that passage is sealed. So again, we have 500 degrees Celsius, 40 atmospheres of pressure, creating a chemical reaction that transforms the air inside of the chamber and the hydrogen and carbon monoxide into carbon dioxide, and it isolates the nitrogen from the air. The majority constituent of the air around us isn't oxygen, it's nitrogen. So the oxygen from the air reacts with the carbon monoxide to create carbon dioxide, which is soluble in water. That's how we carbonate beverages, is by dissolving carbon dioxide in water. So now we have hydrogen, nitrogen, and water-soluble carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide dissolves into the water, and it's eliminated from the reaction system, leaving us with hydrogen and nitrogen in the upper vault of the secondary aeroformer.
So you've got purified carbonized water. So you've got sparkling water.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Pellegrino
You've got
sparkling water. Yeah. But they're going to save this carbon dioxide solution. And we do the same thing in the modern industrial manufacturing process, where the byproduct of carbon dioxide that is produced in the secondary aeroformer in the modern Haber-Bosch process is stored and reserved and recycled to make urea, which is the function of the bent pyramid.
Okay.
It's a step-by-step series where the methane from the step pyramid is converted in the red pyramid into ammonia. The ammonia and the carbon dioxide byproduct from the red pyramid are then converted into the bent pyramid into, depending on the temperature and pressure, ammonium bicarbonate or urea. Okay? So we're dissolving our carbon dioxide byproduct into the water, and we want to eliminate that from the reaction chamber. So we drain the water out. Then we fill it back up. Okay, so now we have the hydrogen and nitrogen in the upper reactor, secondary aeroformer, but it's stuck there because we haven't introduced enough pressure to open the one-way valve. So what comes next? This is the function of the descending passage. So you can't see it in this diagram, but the descending passage is a pump mechanism that was utilized to push more water into the reaction chamber system that's going to increase the pressure, open the one-way valve, and allow water, hydrogen, and nitrogen to flow through that passage into the final synthesis chamber.
And there's a person in the final synthesis chamber right now. So
he just drowned.
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah,
he's way
like
dead.
I said, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near the, you wouldn't want to go in them.
Right.
And it's crazy that people still go inside these things and they're doing like, and like all this spiritual kind of stuff. They're inside chemical reactors.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's, there's this weird, group of people that are into the pyramid spiritual stuff, and they go inside the chambers and do all this kind of metaphysical type stuff.
Sure.
Dude, you're inside of a reaction chamber.
Okay.
You're inside of an industrial chemical synthesis machine, doing Om chants and trying to balance your chakras and like whatever.
Right.
I don't get it. But yeah, the people are in there in the diagram just for scale. Final synthesis chamber, where the ammonia is actually produced in the presence of these electric fields and catalysts. The electric fields coming from lightning, the power source of the Egyptian pyramids. As we've already established, the proof of lightning at these ancient structures, the proof of lightning at the Giza pyramids, telluric current charging, and lightning pushing the final chemical reaction. So this is a modern, one of the original industrial pressure and temperature containers that were designed for this Haber-Bosch process. This is the ancient version of the same thing. A huge temperature and pressure container. And that's one of the main reasons for the function of the pyramid body, is containing all of this pressure. 40 atmospheres of pressure is a lot of pressure. And if you didn't have the body of stone surrounding these reaction chambers the whole friggin' thing would explode. That's one of the main applications for this mass of stones surrounding the Egyptian pyramids. Again, preventing environmental contamination, maintaining the stability of the internal reaction chambers, containing internal pressure, and then also inducing electric fields, the geometry of the tetrahedron itself. So here we have the final synthesis chamber. And if you look down at the bottom, you can see a pit, huge pit. That's not the original configuration. If you look over at the right, you kind of see a white line going around the bottom of the chamber. That's the original level of the floor inside of the red pyramid. And the floor of the final synthesis chamber has been completely removed. And they excavated down into the pit looking for something.
Looking for a body of a pharaoh or something.
Treasure, whatever
or whatever.
Conventional archaeological justification for the excavation. Whatever it was important enough for them to remove all the stone from inside of this thing. And it would be a giant pain in the ass to drag all this stone back up the descending. Wait till you go in. Wait till you climb in your first pyramid. It's a workout going in and out of these things. And there are no stairs. It's just a square shaft going at a super steep angle down into the body of this thing. It's an absolutely preposterous explanation to claim that it's for a pharaonic burial, because how are you getting everything down in there? With all of the burial accoutrement and the big ceremonial procession and the sarcophagus and how are you getting it down in there?
Yeah.
And then how are you getting it up to the final chamber? It doesn't make any sense.
Yep, it's true.
So this is the original level of the floor. I think they were following the extraction shaft. They saw that there was a shaft going down in the center of the chamber. They said, oh, let's follow the shaft to see if it leads to the treasure. So they started excavating and removed all of the stone inside of the chamber, following that extraction shaft, but it didn't go anywhere. It was already completely blocked in with sand and debris and all that stuff, and they never fully excavated it. So the extraction shaft is what I think was inside the final synthesis chamber that was the impetus for the excavation. We'll also talk about an excavation that happened inside of the king's chamber, where they dug underneath the floor of the king's chamber, following a similar shaft. That was the inlet shaft for the sulfur oxides that were being introduced into the king's chamber. Okay, so now we have our hydrogen and nitrogen in the final synthesis chamber, top left corner. Again, you can't see it here because the descending shaft is not in this diagram, but we're using the pump mechanism to compress more water, because as you're filling the chambers, and I have some slides in this in just a minute, the water is also going to fill the pump shaft. So now we're increasing the water level inside the final synthesis chamber. Same temperature and pressure increase that creates the ammonia gas. The ammonia gas dissolves into the water. Ammonia is highly water soluble, meaning it will dissolve into water to create an aqueous ammonia solution, not liquid ammonia. Huge difference between our modern process and the ancient process. We're not supercooling anything. It is ammonia gas dissolved into water, removed through the extraction shaft.
Any idea where the extraction shaft led to?
Yes.
Okay.
It's connected into the bent pyramid and also into possible collection chambers. So Dashur is a barren land in between these two structures. And there's no telling. There's piles of rocks. There's mounds all over there. I would love to take some GPR out to Dashur and see what's really underground there. That would be an area that I would love to see further excavation. But the extraction shaft from the red pyramid is going to be connected into the bent pyramid, and also to collection stations for collection of the aqueous ammonia. But they also would have reserved a portion of it for the processes inside the bent pyramid. So final synthesis chamber. The reaction occurs between the hydrogen and nitrogen under high temperature and pressure in the presence of electric fields and catalyst material that creates gaseous ammonia, Amun, the fertilizer deity. So this just runs the whole process again, so you can see it in operation. And I would love to get a computer engineer to do this. This is what I've done on my own using PowerPoint to illustrate this concept, to create these rudimentary animations. And again, you could just see the thing come to life by just filling it with water and running the entire reaction process and the extraction of the final aqueous ammonia solution. Okay, so here you can see the descending shaft, which isn't visible on those diagrams. The descending shaft is a huge component of the system, and it's a pump shaft that was connected into the external reservoir surrounding the red pyramid. All these pyramids have external reservoirs. Enclosures surrounding the pyramids. Great Pyramid, Central Pyramid, Bent Pyramid, Red Pyramid all have external enclosures. They're reservoirs. So chemical manufacturing process units, right, is a technical term describing the individual units of a chemical manufacturing process. You have pipes, you have reactors, you have compressors. All of the Egyptian pyramids have chemical process units. And I was talking about how the mechanisms of operation that drive the function of the Egyptian pyramids have to be applicable to all of the pyramids because they all have similar chemical manufacturing process units. They all have descending shafts. They all have reaction chambers. They all have connecting passages. They all have an external reservoir. So the mechanisms of operation that apply to the Red Pyramid also have to apply to the Bent Pyramid, the Great Pyramid, the Central Pyramid. This is why I disagree with theories that focus exclusively on the Great Pyramid, because the mechanisms of operation that make it work don't apply to anything else. They don't extrapolate to any other pyramid or a function of anything else. You know, it's a magical laser beam power plant. Okay, so if it is, how do those mechanisms of operation apply to the Red Pyramid? They don't. My work started by reverse engineering the Red Pyramid. And I took the exact same mechanisms of operation and step-by-step processes that make the Red Pyramid work, and I applied them to the Bent Pyramid. I applied them to the Great Pyramid. I applied them to the Central Pyramid, and all of the systems work the exact same way. Same thing with the Step Pyramid. You have an external reservoir. You fill the system with water. You use pumps to increase and decrease the pressure. Everything works the same way with these hydraulic mechanisms of operation, with water being the primary driver of the internal reaction chamber systems and often involved as an initial chemical reactant in the reaction process. They're using the water. So it has multiple functions within the operation of each pyramid. So external reservoir, 33 feet. We talked about the communication encoded in the pyramids. The external reservoir of the Red Pyramid was 33 feet. 33 feet is 1 atmosphere of pressure. The height of the external reservoir is telling you that the external reservoir was used to manipulate pressure. There's communication in the math. Same thing with, like we saw with the White Horse Hills, the proximity to Avebury and the distance of the step-down voltage transformer. There's a mathematical message encoded in that system that if you take it from Avebury, you can apply it to Teotihuacan, you can apply it to Luxor, and it tells you exactly what those systems were for. This is why it's so important for me to establish the initial connection with the stone circles, the White Horse Hills, to this technology, because there's communication encoded in all of these systems. Mm-hmm. And all we have to do is learn the language, and the structure will speak for itself and tell you exactly what it's doing. Okay, so we talked about Giza El Mudir. Huge reservoir. This is the volume of water that can be held in Giza El Mudir. 900 million gallons of water inside Giza El Mudir. So this is how much water they were treating every purification cycle at Giza El Mudir. A massive quantity. This is a huge, huge structure. Absolutely immense. Again, the enclosure at Giza El Mudir is 650 by 350 meters, length by width, and its walls are 15 meters wide and 15 meters high, but they haven't even fully excavated it. It is a massive, massive reservoir enclosure that was designed for treating water. Okay, so we have external reservoir surrounding the Red Pyramid, and we have a little pump station on the eastern side. Inside the reservoir, there is a temple that is the inlet pump station that was delivering the water from the reservoir into the internal reaction chambers. So here we have the diagram. Now I've added the external reservoir at a height of 33 feet, 11 meters, which goes, the blue line going across shows the height of the water. Filling the external reservoir to a height to the top of the reservoir. We have here, again, the reservoir filled with water. It goes in through the inlet that connects into the inlet shaft at the bottom of the descending pump shaft. So this is how water gets into the structure. The water flows from the reservoir into the reaction chambers, and you can see that as water flows into the system and fills the reaction chambers, it's also going to go up the pump shaft. So there's going to be a balancing act that happens. As the water fills the chambers, the pressure inside of the chambers is going to push the water up. Then the weight of the water in the column is going to push back and force more water up into the reaction chambers. And this will go back and forth, where the pressure inside of the chamber pushes the water up into the pump shaft. Then the weight of the water column will push back until the system hits equilibrium. So that's what we have depicted here. The water's going up. The pressure inside of the reaction chambers are pushing the water up into the pump shaft. The pump shaft is pushing back, forcing more water into the reaction chambers until this thing hits equilibrium, where the weight of the water in the pump shaft cannot compress the gas inside anymore, and you can't force any more water up into the pump shaft. So the system is at equilibrium. And now we have our gas, let's say, inside reaction chamber number 2. So again, it's a pressure-actuated one-way valve that was housed in the secondary air reformer that by introducing, here again, we see the animation, reservoir surrounding the bent pyramid, reservoir surrounding the Great Pyramid. We'll talk about the function of the reservoir driving the subterranean pump chamber of the Great Pyramid. Similar mechanisms of operation apply to the function of the Great Pyramid. And we'll get to this in just a minute. This is me. So down inside the subterranean chamber, there's that southern shaft going out to the bottom at the subterranean chamber going out to the left. That's a dead end. So I crawled down inside of that tube during one of my private special permission visits because I wanted to corroborate that it is a 100% dead end at the bottom of the subterranean pump chamber in that southern shaft. So that's me squeezed down into the bottom of the subterranean chamber in the Great Pyramid. There's also a reservoir surrounding the Central Pyramid. Same mechanisms of operation apply in regard to the function of the central pyramid.
When you say there's a reservoir surrounding it,
Yeah.
I mean, what are like, there's evidence of ancient walls that would have been
Yeah,
there?
enclosure. They call them pyramid enclosures. All the diagrams I've shown come from either Keith Hamilton, who's a prolific archaeological researcher who does compilation editions of all the archaeological data and diagrams. So all of this stuff comes from actual excavations, and there is physical evidence of these enclosures that surround all of the pyramids.
Does mainstream, do people all recognize that these enclosures exist around all the
Yeah,
pyramids?
it's indisputable.
Indisputable.
Yeah,
Okay.
they just call them enclosures.
Okay.
They're just walls.
Did they call them walls for water? Or
No.
just-
The conventional explanation
Yeah.
is that it's just a wall
Okay.
that separates the pyramid from the outside world.
Okay.
It's just an enclosure wall
Okay.
that surrounds the pyramids.
But are they like airtight and incredible? I mean, are they really able to hold that amount of water, that amount of pressure?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, the walls at Giza El Mudir.
Because my pool's got leaks in it right
Yeah,
now as
yeah.
we speak, and I can't.
So
get
all
rid
of these chambers, if you go inside the red pyramid, even today, and you look at the joints, so it's a huge fallacy that the Egyptian pyramids are mortarless. That's not true. All of the pyramids use mortar. Even inside the king's chamber. If you look at the joints in between the granite inside the king's chamber, all of it's mortared. It is such a tiny fine line that it is almost imperceptible, but they are 100% mortared and sealed. The
Okay.
internal chambers, watertight and airtight.
Okay.
Giza El Mudir, these walls were 15 meters wide. Wide.
Yeah,
That's a huge amount of stone.
it's huge.
Yeah. And they also have systems like the Wall of the Crow, which is a harbor enclosure on the Giza Plateau. That's another one of these huge enclosure retaining walls that had a sluice gate that controlled flooding of certain areas of the Giza Plateau harbor system. Every one of the pyramids also has a harbor at the valley temples.
Okay. Okay, so the walls exist. Nobody doubts that the walls exist.
100%.
The question is, you're suggesting that they would have been filled with water and they could
Reservoirs,
support
correct.
the
Yeah,
water.
yeah. So the enclosure surrounded each pyramid is not a dry enclosure. Same thing as the dry moat at the step pyramid. There's no such thing as a dry moat. A moat is filled with water, right? It's a reservoir.
So the Sphinx would have also had water and a water enclosure.
So we may get to the function of the Sphinx. I haven't publicly spoken about that yet.
Okay.
But the Sphinx is a reservoir enclosure of sorts, yes.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we'll get to it. It's the final processing stage of the Giza Plateau.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Dude, I'm telling you, I've gone further in depth than anyone else ever has regarding the function of the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
And I have detailed mechanisms of operation like this that describe the function of every single major Egyptian pyramid. Oh, again, there's so much good stuff in here. Communication encoded in the pyramids. There's a little tiny block at the bottom of the northern descending shaft that's angled, and it's at the exact same angle that you would want so that your pump mechanism fits the bottom of the descending shaft. So I want to get to the model real quick. So ammonia, fertilizer applications, we talked about terraforming during the Saharan humid period, how perhaps the pyramids and these white horse cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators were actually artificially terraforming the Sahara. It may not have been a natural occurrence, but they were using these thunderstorm generators, these landscape features, to create thunderstorms, rain, and lightning in conjunction with agricultural fertilizers that terraformed the Sahara. Super interesting ancient technology. Again, the time period from 8500 BC to 5300 BC. You talked about the Saharan humid period, and this is my hypothesis on pyramid terraforming. Ammonia has tons of applications. Processing of bitumen, we talked about that already for shipbuilding. Shipbuilding would have been a huge industry, and we have the modern Calda Petroleum, Apache Oil, crude oil processing and methane processing facility right across from the Red and Bent pyramids. You can also use ammonia for leach mining. Okay, function of the pyramid body. Okay. So we talked about the function of the pyramid body. Ryan, if you would, roll video number 2. Okay, so this is the beginning of the scale model process. Modeling the water inlet at the bottom of the descending shaft. Okay, so this is just one component of a full-scale model of the red pyramid. Just pushing water into the system. Okay, roll video number 3. Wait. Oh, yeah, pull up video number 3, but just don't play it. Okay. Look at this. It is spectacular. Shout out John Sage. You are the man, sir. And I've known about this for more than a year. It took to build this thing. This is a perfect 1/40th scale replica of the red pyramid. Everything is exactly correct in terms of the dimensions of the structure. You can see the pressure gauges at the top of the chamber. See those gauges? Those are pressure gauges that he installed at the top of each reaction chamber.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that's major that's missing from here is the one-way valve.
Right.
Okay, so that's a component that we haven't been able to install in the model yet. The one-way valve that would have maintained the pressure in the first chamber. So let me go back to the function of the pyramid body. Preventing environmental contamination. Maintaining the stability of the internal reaction chambers. Holding the whole thing together. Maintaining pressure. These chambers, at full scale, 500 degrees Celsius and 40 atmospheres of pressure. Massive amounts of pressure. You got to have a huge thing encasing it. And, again, concentration of electric fields. Okay, so run it. Okay, so the water is going to start filling from the bottom right-hand corner through the inlet shaft. And it takes a while for the water to start pumping in. It's going to fill the chambers, just like I talked about. The water is going to fill into the connecting passage and also raise in the pump shaft. This is exactly what I showed in the animations. The water is going to raise. Again, remember, we don't have the one-way valve. So the water is rising into the second chamber at a faster rate than the first chamber, and it's going to flow into the final synthesis chamber. Look at the gauges. The pressure is going up, 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 up. Boom.
Wow. That's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So rest in peace, red pyramid model.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see you in version number 2.
Yeah, whoever was standing in there.
Okay. But this proves everything that I just said about the function of the pyramid body, maintaining the stability of the internal reaction chamber systems. This is made of plexiglass.
And that took like years to build.
It took over a year to build this thing.
Over a year to
So
build.
that's why
And
there
then you
has
just blew
never,
it up
ever,
on the
people are like,
first.
build a scale model, build a
Yeah.
scale. Do you have any friggin' idea how much work it takes?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's no possible way to build a small scale out of limestone. Do it.
Yeah.
Somebody out there, do it. Put your
Right.
money where your mouth is and send me a video when your scale model of the red pyramid is built.
You just pour concrete on top of this, maybe.
So that's the next step, is encasing it in something.
Right,
But then
right.
you wouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah.
So there's some logistics of doing this, creating models.
Yeah.
It is how do these things possibly even exist?
Right,
We
right.
can't even build. Hold on, keep that up because there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. So in the destruction of this unfortunate model, and I told him when he was building it, I was like, John, dude, you're putting so much work into this, and I love you, and I appreciate the support, and you're amazing, but this whole thing is going to explode, bro. He was like, no, I'm going to build it airtight and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I can do it. I was like, dude, just wait. So the pressure that was achieved in the final chamber before it exploded was 1 atmosphere of pressure.
Wow.
It is a 1/40 scale model of the red pyramid that got up to 1 atmosphere. The calculations said 40 atmospheres. Direct correlation. Yeah, and you can see the pressure gauges here at the top.
Yeah.
This is in PSI. The pressure gauges are in PSI.
Right.
But, so again, it's missing the one-way valve that would have maintained the pressure in the first two chambers.
Yeah, it would have blown up a different chamber.
It would have blown up the first two chambers.
Yeah.
That's, again, why these things are built by such huge pieces of stone, massive, massive pieces of limestone, surrounded by an immense core pyramid body to hold the whole thing together and to prevent catastrophic explosions because of the significant pressures inside of this thing. First time I've talked about this publicly. Again, shout out John Sage. You are amazing, sir. This is fantastic work, and I can't wait to see iteration number 2 because we're working on the second version of this. But again, it's a miracle that these things even exist at all. It took a year to build this out of plexiglass. Imagine the scale of operation it would take to build an actual pyramid.
Yeah, 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Just kidding.
So let's go on to back to the slide. So the bent pyramid was taking the ammonia and the carbon dioxide byproduct and converting it into either ammonium bicarbonate or urea. I also have a secondary hypothesis for the function of the bent pyramid that it could also be used to produce nitric acid. And I've gone into some depth explaining both of these chemical reaction processes and mechanisms of operation on the channel. All for the production of fertilizer, again, this deity Ammon. Because again, we talked about how the red pyramid, the product is aqueous ammonia, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide gas. And you can use those two in a very simple reaction process where the carbon dioxide gas is percolated through the ammonia solution to produce ammonium bicarbonate, which is a solid compound fertilizer that's a lot easier to apply to crops. Right? Using it as an aqueous solution isn't ideal. You want to have solid fertilizers. So that was the main application for the bent pyramid, is transforming the aqueous ammonia solution, this liquid chemical, into a solid compound fertilizer by utilizing that byproduct. And that's exactly what we do today in the manufacturing of urea. The very simple reaction is ammonia plus carbon dioxide equals ammonium bicarbonate. All you have to do is percolate the carbon dioxide up through the ammonia solution in the primary reaction chamber of the bent pyramid. It's going to produce solid ammonium bicarbonate. If you increase the temperature and pressure a little bit, you can actually produce urea, which is a much more stable compound.
Is there a way to, like, where would the precursor structures be? You know, like, were they?
Yeah.
Did they build these in a smaller form prior to building these massive pyramids?
Yeah. So you would start on a laboratory scale.
Yeah.
You know, laboratory development is exactly what we did during the modern industrial revolution. We were building small scale reactors like that Haber process reactor. They would have built those on a small scale. And then they would have extrapolated that to a larger scale pyramid structure like the Pyramid of Maidum, the test structure for the red pyramid. And they built it out in the middle of nowhere. It was never intended to be integrated as a functional part.
So if it blew up, that's okay.
So it blew up. Basically, it didn't blow up from the inside, but there was a catastrophic collapse of the exterior casing stones. So the whole thing fell apart. So they abandoned that project, and then they came back to Dashur to rebuild the red and bent pyramids, the final implementation.
Okay.
So there were lessons learned in those test engineering structures that were later engineered into the final pyramid. So there was an evolution in the engineering, for sure.
Okay.
And it all starts on a small scale. Again, the exact same thing happened during the Industrial Revolution. So this is what's happening in the primary chamber of the bent pyramid, is percolation of carbon dioxide gas through the aqueous ammonia solution. Again, that carbon dioxide gas coming from the secondary aeroformer of the red pyramid. I talk a lot about the erosion inside of the bent pyramid being indicative of the high temperature chemical reactions and possibly something went wrong inside of the bent pyramid. The bent pyramid also has a sophisticated hydraulic press mechanism that was utilized for the operation of the stone valve system inside the western shaft of the bent pyramid. And I'm just flying through all this stuff just so we can get to the... But here's a cool animation showing the reaction process inside the bent pyramid. Again, we're filling it with the aqueous ammonia solution, percolating the carbon dioxide gas up to create solid ammonium bicarbonate. Here in the primary reaction chamber of the bent pyramid. Cool little animation showing how that process works. Again, the red bent pyramid has sophisticated engineered chambers In my opinion, the bent pyramid is by far the best and most complicated structure, far surpassing the operation of the Great Pyramid. The mechanisms of operation inside the bent pyramid, it is an incredibly complex machine that has multiple mechanisms of operation and pump mechanisms coming in from the west and coming in from the north. Primary reaction chamber, again, for the production of either urea or ammonium bicarbonate, depending on the pressure and temperature conditions. I think it was most likely urea. It may have also been used to produce nitric acid, and I was going to go into some depth about how the nitric acid was produced. So here, lower separation chambers of the bent pyramid, you introduce more water because you have a solid compound now inside. So how do you get that solid compound redissolved? You introduce more water from the external reservoir through the inlet shaft that terminates into the bottom of the lower reaction chamber system. Again, all the same mechanisms of operation that I just talked about with the red pyramid apply to every single pyramid structure. You fill the system with water, activate the pump shaft, pushes water up into the connecting passage. More water is introduced from the reservoir. Then you activate the western pump. Here's kind of an animation of the whole system in operation. More water comes in from the reservoir, fills the pump shaft, activate the pump shaft, compressing more water into the primary reactor, which is dissolving the solid compound fertilizer by introducing more water and allows it to be extracted into the lower separation chamber and removed from the system. Because again, here in the primary reactor, we now have a solid compound that was being produced. By percolating the carbon dioxide gas through the ammonia solution, you're producing solid ammonium bicarbonate, which at some point is going to precipitate out of the solution as a solid compound. So to redissolve that solid compound, you have to introduce more water into the system, which is why you have the western pump shaft, which allows more water to come from the reservoir into the connecting passage that leads into the in between the two valves. The water will rise into the western pump shaft. The pump compresses the water into the primary reaction chamber, redissolving that solid urea or ammonium bicarbonate, and the whole thing is extracted.